Alien mummy discovered in the desert. A mystery scientists still can't explain. If someone asked you, where on Earth do you think hides the greatest number of secrets? What place would come to your mind first? The pyramids of Egypt, ancient temples, or thousands-year-old tombs? All of them are possible answers. But did you know there is a place even more astonishing? A place where very few people would ever expect to uncover archaeological treasures. That place is the vast, barren deserts scattered across the world. Places that seem to contain nothing but endless sand, fierce winds, and signs of death. Yet, these very deserts are actually enormous archives of human history. Beneath layers of sand may lie mysterious mummies that once made the world wonder if they were extraterrestrial beings. Lost cities that disappeared without explanation. Ships filled with gold and treasures that have rested silently for hundreds of years, and even traces of civilizations that modern science still struggles to fully understand. Every discovery leaves archaeologists stunned, because the deeper we dig into the Earth, the more mysterious history becomes. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Ancient History channel. It's wonderful to have you with us again. Dear friends, archaeology has always been like a conversation with the past. Every bone, every broken piece of pottery, every fossilized footprint, and every perfectly preserved mummy is a fragment that helps humanity reconstruct history. But what makes archaeology truly fascinating is that not every discovery provides clear answers. On the contrary, some discoveries only create more questions the more they are studied. Why did a tiny mummy once make the entire world believe in the possibility of extraterrestrial life? Who were the people behind more than 1 million mummies hidden beneath the deserts of Egypt? What caused an entire prosperous city to vanish beneath the sea of sand? And how many forgotten civilizations are still waiting to be discovered? So, in the hope of getting closer to answering these incredible mysteries, in today's video, we are going to embark on a journey across some of the most famous deserts on Earth. From the Atacama Desert in Chile, the vast Sahara Desert of North Africa, and the Rub al Khali Desert on the Arabian Peninsula, to the mysterious sandy landscapes of Peru, Jordan, Syria, Namibia, Israel, and Egypt. These are places where every gust of wind has the power to uncover a secret that has remained buried for thousands of years. Together, we will explore 7 of the most shocking archaeological discoveries ever found in the deserts around the world. Each story will not only reveal secrets hidden for thousands of years, but also remind us that history still holds countless mysteries far beyond our imagination. So, are you ready to join me on this incredible journey? If you are, let's begin with our first discovery right now. The alien mummy of the Atacama Desert. Can you believe that a tiny mummy, smaller than an adult's hand, once sparked a worldwide debate for years about the existence of extraterrestrial life? Even some of the most experienced scientists in the world had to spend a great deal of time trying to uncover the truth behind this mysterious discovery. Some people claimed it was the first evidence that beings from another planet had once appeared on Earth. Others believed it was simply an elaborate hoax, but when the truth was finally revealed, the real story behind this mummy turned out to be far more haunting than any of the rumors that came before it. The main character of this story is a mummy known as Ata, discovered in the Atacama Desert, a region located mainly in northern Chile and extending partly into southern Peru. As you may know, the Atacama Desert is famous for being one of the driest places on Earth. These unique natural conditions have allowed countless human remains to be preserved almost perfectly for hundreds and even thousands of years. However, no discovery had ever shocked the archaeological world quite like Ata. When the mummy was first discovered, researchers were almost speechless. In front of them was a body measuring only about 6 inches long, so small that it could easily fit inside the palm of a human hand. Of course, what stunned everyone was not only its size, but also its extremely unusual appearance. With an elongated head, large eye sockets, an abnormally shaped skull, and fewer ribs than a normal human being, Ata looked almost identical to the image of an alien often seen in science fiction movies. The news quickly spread around the world. Numerous articles, online forums, and television programs began referring to Ata as the alien mummy. Many people considered it the strongest evidence ever discovered for the existence of extraterrestrial beings. However, What is important to understand is that no respected archaeologist or scientist at the time ever claimed that Atta actually came from another world. They knew that an unusual appearance does not automatically mean an extraterrestrial origin. Even more surprising was the fact that after its discovery, Atta was not immediately taken to a museum or scientific research facility. Instead, the mummy ended up in the hands of a private collector in Spain. And from that moment, the story became even more mysterious. Through unclear circumstances, images of Atta appeared in a documentary about extraterrestrial life. The film quickly spread around the world, turning Atta into a symbol for countless theories about UFOs and alien civilizations. Millions of people believed that humanity had finally discovered the evidence they had been waiting for over decades. However, as we know, science requires evidence, not emotions or assumptions. And so, for nearly 10 years, multiple research teams continuously attempted to gain access to the specimen in order to conduct modern scientific tests. Then, in 2018, a major turning point finally arrived when scientists performed DNA analysis along with advanced genetic testing. The results shocked the world. Atta was completely human. The scientist who directly participated in the research was Gary Nolan, a professor of microbiology and immunology at the School of Medicine at Stanford University in California, United States. After analyzing Atta's bone structure and sequencing her genome, the research team reached one clear conclusion. Atta was not an extraterrestrial creature. She was simply a human child from Chile. According to Professor Nolan, Atta's extremely small size was not because she belonged to another species, but rather because of a series of severe genetic mutations. The girl had at least 7 mutated genes associated with serious developmental abnormalities. These mutations caused her skull to develop abnormally, her ribs to become deformed, her bone structure to change, and her body to stop growing at a very small size. Furthermore, researchers suggested that Atta most likely suffered from congenital diaphragmatic hernia, an extremely dangerous birth defect in which the diaphragm does not develop properly and can directly threaten a person's life. DNA analysis also showed that Atta's genetic profile was closely related to the indigenous people of Chile, completely rejecting the theory of an extraterrestrial origin. But perhaps what troubles many people the most is not the scientific conclusion itself. Professor Gary Nolan once shared that Atta's story had been transformed into an alien legend, while the reality behind it was simply a human tragedy. She may have been a child born with severe genetic disorders. After her death, her body was naturally preserved by the extremely dry environment of the Atacama Desert. Years later, her remains were traded as a strange object before becoming the center of countless rumors and speculation. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries in archaeology are not aliens or lost civilizations. Sometimes, the greatest mystery is the fate of the human beings who once lived, suffered, and left their traces behind. And Atta's story is perhaps the clearest example of that. So, after this mystery has been solved, do you still believe that extraterrestrial life exists somewhere on Earth? Or are these stories simply the result of human imagination creating explanations for what we do not understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let's discuss together. 260 ancient tombs in the Sahara Desert, a forgotten civilization, older than the Egyptian pyramids. If I asked you, what is the oldest civilization ever to exist in North Africa? What would your answer be? Perhaps most people would immediately think of ancient Egypt, with its magnificent pyramids standing proudly for thousands of years, right? But as you know, history always has a way of surprising us. And this time, that surprise comes from the heart of the Sahara Desert in eastern Sudan, a country located in northeastern Africa. Here, archaeologists discovered an ancient burial complex that dates back even further than the first Egyptian pyramids, forcing researchers to completely reconsider the history of the entire North African region. This massive cemetery was not discovered through traditional excavation methods. Instead, it was found during surveys using satellite imagery and aerial photography. During these surveys, archaeologists were surprised to discover hundreds of unusual structures scattered beneath the dry, barren sands of eastern Sahara, within Sudanese territory. Finally, after months of field investigations, they confirmed that this location contained as many as 260 ancient tombs, a number far beyond their original expectations. Of course, what makes this discovery extraordinary is not only the sheer number of burial sites, but also their incredible age. Archaeologists revealed that artifacts and samples analyzed from the site showed that most of these tombs were constructed between 4000 and 3000 BC. In other words, they have existed for approximately 6,000 years, meaning they were built many centuries before the Egyptians constructed their first pyramids. Just imagine this. At a time when only a few advanced civilizations existed in the world, a region that today appears to be nothing more than scorching sand and rocky terrain was once home to a thriving community of people with their own burial traditions and monumental structures that survived for 6 millennia. What does this prove? But the discoveries did not stop there. When excavations began, archaeologists continued to uncover human remains along with the bones of cattle, sheep, and goats buried together inside many of the tombs. These findings quickly helped researchers reconstruct part of the daily life of the ancient inhabitants. Unlike the agricultural civilizations along the Nile River, this community was likely made up of nomadic herders who specialized in raising livestock and constantly moved in search of water sources and grasslands. Another fascinating detail that captured the attention of experts was the architecture of the tombs. Many burial sites were surrounded by circular or oval-shaped walls, with some structures reaching a diameter of up to 260 feet. This scale was far larger than anything archaeologists had previously known about prehistoric nomadic burial sites. Before this discovery, the entire Sahara region had only recorded around 20 similar archaeological sites, including Wadi Kashab, Wadi El Ku, and Bir Asele, all located in Sudan. The discovery of hundreds of additional tombs shows that the settlement network of this ancient community was far more extensive than previous theories had suggested. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect lies in the arrangement of the graves. After analyzing the burial patterns, researchers noticed that some larger tombs were positioned at the center, while many smaller tombs were built around them. According to experts, these larger tombs may have belonged to leaders or individuals with higher social status, while the surrounding smaller graves likely belonged to other members of the community. Of course, this remains only a hypothesis, but if this interpretation is correct, it would mean that nomadic societies around 6,000 years ago already had a clear social hierarchy, something that was previously believed to exist mainly in more developed civilizations. This discovery also raises another important question. Why did these herders bury so many valuable animals with the dead when those animals were actually their most important resources for survival? According to archaeologists, the answer may lie in the symbolic value of livestock. In nomadic societies, the number of cattle, sheep, or goats directly represented the wealth and power of a family. Therefore, burying animals together with their owners may have been a way to display social status even after death. Some experts even compare this practice to the way modern people display expensive possessions to demonstrate their position and success. The more researchers study these tombs, the clearer the picture of ancient life becomes. Between 4000 and 3000 BC, North Africa entered a period known as the African Humid Period. During that time, the Sahara looked completely different from the dry desert we know today. Vast grasslands, natural lakes, and fertile regions stretched across the area, creating ideal conditions for raising livestock. However, the climate gradually changed. Rainfall became increasingly scarce, lakes began to disappear, and grasslands slowly vanished. The Sahara gradually transformed into the largest hot desert on Earth, just as we know it today. Researchers discovered that many of the burial sites were located near ancient lakebeds, former wetlands, or water sources that disappeared thousands of years ago. This suggests that these nomadic communities followed water sources in order to sustain both their people and their livestock. Even more remarkably, archaeological evidence shows that they did not return to this area only once. For centuries, and even into the first millennium BC, different generations continued to use this location as a cemetery. This proves that the region once held enormous spiritual and cultural significance for the communities that lived across the Sahara. You see, a land that appears to be nothing more than endless sand and burning sunlight today was once the homeland of an entire culture that history nearly forgot. Perhaps these ancient tombs are quietly telling the story of a greener Sahara, a place where people once lived, raised animals, and built traditions that survived for thousands of years. What do you think? Ancient mummies older than Egypt in the Chilean desert, the Chinchorro civilization that amazed the world. When people mention the art of mummification, many immediately think of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs were preserved inside magnificent pyramids for thousands of years. For centuries, people believed that the Egyptians were the first civilization in the world to master this incredible technique. But as you know, history once again knows how to surprise us. Because in the Atacama Desert, located in northern Chile and extending into southern Peru, archaeologists discovered a culture that practiced mummification thousands of years before the Egyptians. What makes this discovery even more extraordinary is that they did not reserve this ritual only for kings or the elite. Instead, they performed it for everyone. They were the Chinchorro people, an ancient community of hunters and fishermen who once lived along the northern coast of Chile and southern Peru. The first Chinchorro mummies were discovered in the Atacama Desert region during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. However, it was only after decades of research that archaeologists realized this was the oldest known mummification tradition in human history. What amazed scientists was not only the incredible age of these mummies, but also their remarkably unique appearance. Some bodies were placed lying flat, while others were buried in a seated position with their legs bent. Some mummies still preserved their original skin, hair, and even carefully attached wigs. Remarkably, some faces appeared to maintain a natural expression, almost like a smile, even after more than 5,000 years, creating a feeling that was both mysterious and difficult to explain. Among the most impressive discoveries was the mummy of a woman whose face mask was made from pelican skin, combined with woven reeds and rope. This single detail alone shows that the craftsmanship of the Chinchorro people had reached an astonishing level for a community that lived thousands of years ago. If we look at their daily life, perhaps no one would expect the Chinchorro people to create such sophisticated mummies, right? They did not build large cities, they had no palaces, they had no pyramids. They did not practice metallurgy. They did not develop advanced pottery like many other civilizations. The Chinchorro were simply coastal communities. They built temporary shelters from animal skins and sea lion bones and survived by fishing with nets, spears, and hooks. Their lifestyle was extremely simple, completely different from the image of a powerful and wealthy civilization. So what made them dedicate so much effort to preserving their dead? That question still does not have a completely certain answer. Unlike ancient Egypt, where mummification was mainly reserved for pharaohs, royalty, and nobles, the Chinchorro performed this ritual for every member of their society. The elderly were mummified. Adults were mummified. Children were mummified. Even unborn infants were mummified. Archaeologists have even discovered animal mummies that were carefully preserved almost as carefully as human remains. This discovery has led many researchers to believe that the Chinchorro did not view mummification as a symbol of power or social status. Instead, it may have been an important part of their spiritual beliefs, a way to keep their ancestors present and connected with the living. Through numerous excavations, experts discovered that Chinchorro mummification techniques changed over different periods. In the earliest stages, they removed internal organs, strengthened the skeleton using reeds, wooden sticks, and plant fibers, and then filled the body with soil or ash to maintain its shape. The skin was carefully stitched back together or replaced with other materials if it had deteriorated. Finally, the entire body was covered with a layer of black manganese mineral pigment, creating what became known as the famous black mummies. Around 2800 BC, the black color gradually began to be replaced by red, possibly because manganese became more difficult to obtain or because symbolic beliefs about colors changed. Mummies from this period were often covered with red ochre, leaving only the face exposed. One of the most famous mummies discovered belonged to a young boy who was placed on a mat woven from reeds. His internal organs had been replaced with soil, while his entire body was covered with black-colored powder. Even after approximately 5,000 years, many details remained remarkably well preserved. Of course, nature itself also played an important role in creating this extraordinary preservation. The Atacama Desert, located mainly in Chile, is considered the driest place on Earth. During the day, surface temperatures can reach 122 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, while rainfall is almost non-existent in many areas. The air is extremely dry, and the high concentration of salt and sodium in the soil makes it very difficult for bacteria to survive. As a result, human remains quickly lose moisture and can be naturally preserved for incredibly long periods. Many scientists believe that these naturally preserved bodies may have inspired the Chinchorro people to intentionally develop the art of mummification. Studies using radiocarbon dating methods, combined with the analysis of plant fossils from the Andes Mountains, show that Chinchorro mummification traditions began expanding around 7,000 years ago, when the population in the region increased rapidly. Later, around 5,000 years ago, this community gradually declined, but the practice of mummification continued for more than another 2,000 years, and the discoveries did not end there. Another finding that deeply moved archaeologists was the discovery of child mummies attached to wooden frames. According to researchers, while they were alive, young children were often carried on their parents' backs using wooden frames. After their deaths, the children were still placed onto similar frames before burial. This reveals the deep emotional connection between family members and the belief that the dead continued to accompany the living. More than 2,000 gold and silver coins, 1,845 copper ingots, weighing 17 tons, a shipwreck, buried beneath the desert. If someone told you that a massive desert was hiding a ship that had been resting silently for nearly 5 centuries, would you believe them? Probably not, right? Some people might even think it was nothing more than a fictional story. After all, ships belong at the bottom of the ocean, while deserts are supposed to contain only sand, sunlight, and wind. So how could a ship possibly end up there? But believe it or not, this seemingly impossible discovery is completely real. And when the ship was finally excavated, what was found inside left both archaeologists and historians around the world absolutely stunned. More than 2,000 gold and silver coins, 1,845 copper ingots with a total weight of nearly 17 tons, hundreds of elephant tusks, and countless valuable artifacts were discovered almost perfectly preserved after spending nearly 500 years buried beneath the scorching desert sand. The story began in 2008 in the region of Aranjamund, located in the country of Namibia in southern Africa. This coastal area is famous for its diamond mines, where the enormous dunes of the Namib Desert stretch all the way to the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. While workers were carrying out diamond mining operations there, they unexpectedly discovered large wooden beams and pieces of metal emerging from beneath the sand. At first, no one believed it was an archaeological discovery. Many assumed these were simply remains of an old structure or a modern fishing vessel that had been buried over time. But as excavation continued, more and more ancient artifacts began to appear. Gold and silver coins, metal bars, ceramic fragments, and other historical objects slowly emerged from the sand. Immediately, the area was sealed off, so archaeologists could begin a detailed investigation. After months of research, experts determined that the remains belonged to a 16th century Portuguese merchant ship. The discovery quickly became known as the Aranjamund shipwreck, named after the location where it was found. However, after comparing historical documents, researchers reached an even more astonishing conclusion. The ship was most likely the Bom Jesus, a famous Portuguese trading vessel that mysteriously disappeared during a voyage to India in 1533. According to historical records, the Bom Jesus departed from Lisbon, Portugal on March 7, 1533. The mission of the ship was to transport goods to India and return to Europe carrying spices, precious metals, and other valuable products. At that time, Portugal was one of the world's greatest maritime powers, controlling a vast trading network stretching from Europe to Africa and Asia. But then, the Bom Jesus disappeared. No warning signal, no sailors ever returned, no records explained what had happened. For hundreds of years, the fate of the ship remained only a mystery, mentioned in historical documents. Until the discovery in 2008. What makes this discovery especially remarkable is the location of the shipwreck. Today, the remains of the vessel lie in the middle of a dry desert region, quite far from the current shoreline. In reality, when the Bom Jesus sank, this area was still part of the coastline. Over time, sand from the Namib Desert continuously shifted and gradually covered the ship, layer by layer. After nearly 5 centuries, the entire vessel had almost completely disappeared beneath a massive sea of sand. Ironically, this thick layer of sand became a natural, safe deposit box, protecting the ship from ocean waves, currents, and oxidation. When archaeologists began excavating the site, They could hardly believe their eyes. Inside the remains of the ship were more than 2,000 gold and silver coins, preserved in remarkable condition. These coins had been minted in different European kingdoms, reflecting the enormous trading network of Portugal during that era. But the discoveries did not stop there. Researchers also uncovered 1,845 copper ingots, weighing nearly 17 tons in total. This was an enormous amount of metal for a 16th century merchant ship. According to experts, this copper was most likely intended for trade at ports throughout Africa and Asia. Another discovery that attracted special attention from scientists was the presence of 105 elephant tusks. Through DNA analysis, researchers determined that these tusks came from West African elephants. This revealed that before heading toward India, the ship had likely stopped at trading ports along the West African coast to acquire ivory, an extremely valuable commodity at the time. In addition to gold, silver, copper, and ivory, archaeologists also discovered many other artifacts, including pottery, navigation tools, weapons, and everyday objects belonging to the ship's crew. Together, these discoveries provide a vivid picture of life aboard long-distance ocean voyages nearly half a millennium ago. What surprised experts even more was the remarkable preservation of the ship itself. Many wooden sections still maintain their original shape. This is extremely rare for a shipwreck nearly 500 years old. However, hidden among this enormous treasure was one mysterious absence: the crew. A large ship like the Bom Jesus could have carried around 200 people. Yet throughout the entire excavation process, archaeologists found no human remains. So what happened to them? Were they all swept away by the ocean? Or did some survive and manage to reach the coast of Namibia? To this day, there is still no definite answer. Many historians believe that after the ship was pushed toward the shore by a powerful storm, some sailors may have survived the wreck. However, the coastline of Namibia is known for its extremely harsh conditions. On one side lies the cold Atlantic Ocean, influenced by the Benguela Current. On the other side stretches the dry and unforgiving Namib Desert, extending for hundreds of miles. Without fresh water and food supplies, the chances of survival would have been incredibly low. And so, after many years, those questions remain unanswered. It is truly difficult to understand. What do you think happened to those unfortunate sailors, and why did they leave behind absolutely no trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss together. More than 25 giant drawings in the Peruvian desert, the secret of a civilization that came before the Nazca lines. When people mention giant drawings carved into the ground, many will immediately think of the famous Nazca lines of Peru. The enormous figures of birds, monkeys, spiders, and other shapes that can only be fully seen from the air have fascinated humanity for nearly a century. There have even been countless theories suggesting that they were alien runways or evidence of a civilization far more advanced than its time. But there is one fascinating fact that very few people know. While many people were still searching for answers about the Nazca lines, archaeologists made an even more surprising discovery. It turns out that long before the Nazca civilization existed, another culture had already created enormous drawings across the desert. And this discovery is forcing archaeologists to rewrite the history of the region. The story takes place in Palpa, a region in southern Peru located not far from the famous Nazca lines. On May 28th, archaeologists announced that they had discovered more than 25 additional giant drawings, also known as geoglyphs, stretching across the coastal desert area of Palpa. What makes this discovery especially remarkable is that researchers did not find these drawings by walking through the desert as they had done in the past. Instead, they used drones to scan the entire area from above. Modern technology revealed patterns and outlines that were almost impossible for humans to recognize while standing on the ground. When the first images were transmitted back, the entire archaeological team was amazed. Across the endless sea of sand appeared dozens of massive drawings featuring a wide variety of subjects. There were human figures, animals, and mysterious symbols with spiritual meanings that no one has been able to fully explain until today. One of the most impressive figures discovered was the image of a dancing woman. Her body, with both arms stretched outward as if she were moving, creates a remarkably lively impression, even though the drawing has remained motionless on the desert floor for more than 2,000 years. Not far away was the figure of an orca, a creature that ancient Peruvian people viewed as a symbol of supernatural power. In their beliefs, the orca was not simply an ocean animal, but also represented strength, protection, and the connection between humans and the gods. According to archaeologist Johnny Ayla, from Peru's Ministry of Culture, most of the newly discovered drawings were not created by the Nazca people, as many had previously believed. Through analysis of artistic styles, construction techniques, and geographic distribution, researchers determined that these geoglyphs most likely belonged to the Paracas culture, which existed more than 2,000 years ago, hundreds of years before the rise of the Nazca civilization. This is exactly what makes the discovery so historically important. For many years, scientists considered the Nazca civilization to be the first culture responsible for creating Peru's famous geoglyphs. But now, archaeological evidence suggests that the Paracas people were actually the ones who began this tradition. Furthermore, Johnny Ayla explained that another 25 previously known geoglyphs, discovered earlier by local residents, were also accurately mapped by the archaeological team using drones. Thanks to this technology, researchers were able to observe the complete layouts, sizes, and relationships between the drawings, something that had previously been almost impossible to achieve. According to experts, the use of drones is creating a revolution in archaeology. Even areas that seem to have already been thoroughly studied may still hide many secrets beneath layers of sand, or may only reveal their true nature when viewed from above. Just imagine, without modern technology, these mysterious drawings could have remained hidden under the desert sun for hundreds of more years, don't you think? However, the biggest question still remains: why did the Paracas people create these enormous drawings? Until now, there is no single agreed-upon answer. Some archaeologists believe they were ritual symbols created to honor gods or ask for successful harvests. Another theory suggests that they served as giant landmarks, helping groups of people navigate across the vast desert landscape. Others believe that the geoglyphs were places where communities gathered for ceremonies, allowing humans to communicate with the divine through symbols that could only truly be seen from the sky. Of course, all of these ideas remain only theories, but regardless of their true purpose, creating drawings stretching tens or even hundreds of meters across the desert using simple tools more than 2,000 years ago was undoubtedly an extraordinary achievement, wouldn't you agree? Now let's take a closer look at the Paracas culture. According to archaeological research, this civilization began developing after approximately 800 BC in the Chincha, Pisco, and Ica valleys, located north of Palpa, Peru. Later, this community expanded into the Nazca Valley and throughout the wider Palpa region. Paracas society was governed by a priestly class that played a central role in religious life. They were also famous for their advanced textile production, pottery craftsmanship, and agricultural techniques, which were highly developed for their time. Because of this, many experts believe that the geoglyphs were not created randomly. Behind every line and shape was careful planning to create enormous figures that could only be viewed properly from above. The Paracas people must have possessed advanced abilities in measurement, proportion, and large-scale organization of labor. This is what continues to impress archaeologists the more they study these mysterious creations. Today, when airplanes fly over the Palpa region, passengers can still see some of these figures clearly displayed across the golden desert landscape. Even after more than 2,000 years, many geoglyphs have maintained their astonishing shapes thanks to the extremely dry climate of Peru's coastal desert. This truly is a fascinating discovery, isn't it? Hundreds of dead cities in the Syrian desert, a thriving civilization that disappeared without a trace. My dear friends, have you ever imagined that in the middle of a harsh desert where the daytime heat can be intense enough to destroy life, while nighttime temperatures can drop to freezing levels, there could once have been hundreds of prosperous cities? It may sound impossible, right? But this is actually a historical fact. What is even more fascinating is that these cities were not suddenly destroyed by war, nor were they wiped away by a massive earthquake. Instead, they were gradually abandoned by their own inhabitants, eventually buried beneath the dust and sand of time for more than 1,000 years. Even today, the true reason why an entire urban region transformed into a group of dead cities remains one of the biggest questions that continues to spark debate among archaeologists. So what really happened to these mysterious cities? Who were the people who once lived there? Let's travel together to the northern Syrian desert to uncover their forgotten story. Located in the Syrian Arab Republic, a country in Western Asia, This region has an extremely harsh climate. During summer, daytime temperatures often exceed 104 degrees Fahrenheit, while nighttime temperatures can drop dramatically. Rainfall is extremely limited. Hot winds and powerful sandstorms frequently sweep across the landscape, making this one of the most challenging environments in the Middle East. Today, when standing in this region, all we see are stretches of white stone, collapsed walls, and ancient roads covered by sand. It is difficult to believe that this place was once a thriving center of trade and civilization. In 1862, French archaeologist Emsa Dawalgai was the first person to record and announce the discovery of hundreds of ancient settlements buried in this northern Syrian desert region. As layers of sand were gradually removed, archaeologists were greeted by a scene that left them amazed. Stone walls were still standing. The remains of temples, palaces, and large structures were still clearly visible. Many paved roads could still be traced even after thousands of years. Although time had eroded much of the landscape, the scale of these structures revealed that these were once carefully planned and organized cities. However, what affected researchers the most was not only the ruins themselves, but the overwhelming silence. No voices of people, no camel caravans, no crowded marketplaces, only the sound of wind passing through broken stone walls and sandstorms sweeping across abandoned streets. Because of this haunting atmosphere, archaeologists later gave this region a name that perfectly captured its mystery: the Dead Cities. According to many historical records, more than 6,000 years ago, this area was already located along important transportation routes connecting Syria with regions in both the east and the west. It was considered one of the ancient trade corridors where merchants frequently traveled to exchange goods, cultures, and knowledge. Thanks to this strategic location, the cities in the region developed rapidly. Homes were built closely together. Temples, public squares, and major buildings were constructed one after another. A land surrounded by desert became a meeting place for many different civilizations. But then, what caused everything to disappear? That is the question researchers have been trying to answer for more than a century. One of the earliest theories suggested that the cause was economic decline. According to this idea, in 611 AD, the Persian Empire captured Antioch, an important city in the region. This event disrupted trade routes connecting the area with Western territories. When merchant caravans stopped passing through, goods could no longer circulate as they had before. Markets gradually became empty. Trade declined, causing the local economy to collapse. For cities that depended heavily on commerce, this was a devastating blow. Over time, more and more residents left their homeland in search of better opportunities elsewhere. However, not all archaeologists agree with this explanation. Many experts believe that trade was only part of the problem. The decisive factor may have been something far more fundamental: water. Today, when looking at this landscape, it is difficult to imagine that this region once had a relatively advanced system of rivers, canals, and water storage facilities. But even those systems could not withstand long-term climate changes. If years passed without sufficient rainfall, reservoirs gradually dried up. Irrigation sources disappeared. Livestock lost access to grazing areas. People no longer had enough water to survive. In a desert environment, water has always been the most valuable resource. Once the water disappeared, every building, every city, and every economy became impossible to maintain. Additionally, some historians believe that the expansion of the Byzantine Empire in nearby regions also contributed to population movement toward areas with more favorable living conditions. Over time, the population slowly declined. Homes were left empty. Markets stopped operating. Temples were abandoned. And eventually, an entire urban landscape disappeared into history. However, what fascinates archaeologists the most is not only the collapse of these cities, but their incredible creation in the first place. How were ancient people able to build such large stone structures in such an unforgiving environment? Where did they obtain their water? How did they grow food? How did they support thousands of inhabitants in a place that appears to contain nothing but sand and sunlight? To this day, many of these questions remain unanswered. Every new excavation only helps us piece together a few more fragments of this much larger historical puzzle. It is truly a fascinating mystery, isn't it? But hopefully in the future, archaeologists will be able to uncover more answers to these forgotten stories. Until then, let us continue waiting and discovering what secrets these ancient dead cities still have to reveal. DNA from the remains of two 7,000-year-old women reveals a mysterious human lineage that once lived in the green Sahara. Have you ever imagined that the place known today as the largest hot desert on Earth was once a lush green landscape filled with lakes, grasslands, and countless species of animals? If we could travel back in time around 10,000 to 15,000 years ago, we might not even recognize the Sahara we know today. The endless sand dunes stretching toward the horizon would no longer exist. Instead, there would be vast grasslands where humans could hunt, raise animals, and build their own communities. But what truly shocked scientists was not simply the fact that the Sahara was once green. The most astonishing discovery was that beneath the soil of this desert region, researchers uncovered evidence of a completely mysterious human lineage, a group that existed in isolation for thousands of years and had never been known to science before. This discovery is considered one of the most important archaeological and genetic findings about North Africa in recent years. As you may already know, the Sahara Desert today stretches across 11 countries in North Africa, covering an area nearly equivalent to the size of the United States or China. It is one of the harshest environments on the planet. However, according to a study published in the journal Nature, between approximately 14,500 and 5,000 years ago, the Sahara looked completely different. Scientists call this period the African Humid Period. Abundant rainfall transformed dry desert landscapes into green savannas. Lakes, rivers, and wetlands appeared across the region, creating ideal conditions for countless species of animals to thrive. Elephants, giraffes, hippos, and many other large animals once lived there. Humans also chose these fertile lands as places to settle. One of the most important archaeological sites studied is Takarkori, located in southwestern Libya in North Africa. Takarkori is a natural rock shelter that was used by humans as a place of habitation thousands of years ago. It was here that archaeologists discovered the remains of two women who lived approximately 7,000 years ago. At first glance, this may have seemed like an ordinary archaeological discovery, but when scientists conducted DNA analysis, everything changed. A research team led by Professor Johannes Krauss from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Germany successfully reconstructed the genomes of these two women. This became the first complete genetic data ever obtained from people who lived during the time when the Sahara was still green. The results surprised the entire scientific community. The two Takarkori women did not belong to any previously known ancient human population. Instead, they were descendants of a separate human lineage that had remained isolated for thousands of years. According to Professor Krauss, the most astonishing fact was that their genomes showed almost no signs of mixing with populations from sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, or prehistoric Europe. In other words, for a very long period of time, this community lived almost completely separated from the rest of the world. Just imagine, while many other human groups were constantly migrating, interacting, and mixing with neighboring populations, there was still another group that preserved its own genetic characteristics for thousands of years. Isn't that something very few scientists could have expected before? What makes this discovery even more fascinating is that archaeological evidence shows the Takarkori people were not primitive or isolated in terms of culture. On the contrary, they were skilled herders who raised domesticated animals. During excavations, archaeologists discovered many artifacts, including stone tools, wooden objects, animal bones, pottery, woven baskets, and even carefully carved small sculptures. These findings prove that they had built a stable community with a relatively rich cultural life. However, one question continues to puzzle scientists. If animal herding techniques originated from other regions, why does Takarkori DNA show almost no evidence of genetic mixing with outside communities? According to Professor Johannes Krauss, this is the most mysterious aspect of the study. He suggests that the Takarkori people adopted livestock herding techniques but did not absorb the genetic ancestry of the groups that introduced those practices. In other words, they adopted cultural knowledge while maintaining genetic isolation. This is an extremely rare phenomenon in human history. By comparing genomes, researchers also discovered that the ancestors of the Takarkori people separated from sub-Saharan human populations around 50,000 years ago. This was also the period when many groups of Homo sapiens began leaving Africa, migrating into the Middle East, and later spreading into Europe and Asia. becoming ancestors of most modern populations outside Africa. According to the research team, the Takar lineage may represent one of the last remaining traces of the genetic diversity that once existed in North Africa between approximately 50,000 and 20,000 years ago. This is an extremely important hypothesis because it suggests that the genetic history of North Africa is far more complex than scientists previously believed. Another discovery that attracted significant scientific attention was the amount of Neanderthal DNA found in the Takar remains. As we know, when the ancestors of modern humans left Africa, they encountered and interbred with Neanderthals in various parts of Eurasia. Therefore, most people living outside Africa today carry a certain percentage of Neanderthal DNA. However, the Takar people carried only a very small amount of Neanderthal ancestry. This suggests that they had very limited contact with populations outside Africa throughout their history. But then, what happened to them? According to researchers, around 3000 BC, the African humid period came to an end. The climate began changing rapidly. Lakes gradually dried up, grasslands disappeared. The Sahara once again transformed into one of the hottest and driest regions on Earth. The Takar community gradually disappeared as their environment changed. However, they did not completely vanish from history. Professor Krauss explained that genetic traces of this lineage still exist among some modern North African populations today. This means that although the Takar community no longer exists as a separate society, part of their legacy continues to survive within the DNA of modern humans. This discovery not only helps us better understand the history of the Sahara, but also provides a completely new perspective on human evolution and migration. It can be said that every ancient DNA sample is like a lost page from the book of human history. And only by decoding these genetic clues can we truly understand how rich, complex, and surprising the story of humanity's past really is. Dear friends, today's journey has taken us across some of the driest deserts on Earth to uncover archaeological discoveries that have amazed the entire scientific community. Every mummy, every buried city, and every ancient trace reminds us that history still holds countless secrets waiting to be discovered. So, in your opinion, which discovery impressed you the most throughout today's journey? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the Ancient History channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next fascinating journeys of exploration. For now, goodbye, and I'll see you again in the next video.